Hello and welcome back to the Seamus Evans Show. Today, I've got a guest on because I want to talk about something very important in the larger scale of the world. A lot of people don't believe it. This falls into a conspiracy theory where people say it isn't true. You know who does believe it's happening is Leonardo DiCaprio, because when he won his Oscar for The Revenant, it's all he bloody went on about. Now, I have got Sean Kennedy on, who is a climate change guru. This man knows what he's talking about when it comes to climate change. I do not. Obviously working for Totally Wild, I fell in love with the ecosystem and the world and how we need to champion conservation and protect the world, but I don't know much about it. So joining me now, Sean Kennedy. Hey man, how are ya?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Now, climate change. Mate, first of all, how long have you been in that space of climate change? That we're like as a passion, as a hobby, as an interest?
I guess probably I've always been like very interested in generally just in like how things sort of work, if you know what I mean. So I've always been like had a really like strong interest in science. I kind of, I often, as a kid would watch documentaries. As a child, I was obsessed with David Attenborough stuff.
Yeah.
Channel 7, World Around Us, all that stuff. And showing my age there. But, I was always interested in how things work. Like when I went and when I did an undergraduate uni in science, like I went there thinking I would be much more like interested in like ecology and biology and stuff like that. Funnily enough, in grade 12, when I finished my HSC, again, showing my age, I don't even know if it's called that in New South Wales anymore. I lived in Queensland for over 2 decades now. But the, biology wasn't one of my best subjects by far. I think it was second last. It was like art and biology with my worst subjects. But when I went to uni, it was still like my interest, ecology and stuff. But when I went there, I was way more interested in like geology and chemistry and stuff. Because it was more like how the earth is like formed and like how like, the chemical properties of stuff and erosion and like, the way that continents move around and the way things get weathered. And, I got like interested in soil science and stuff because it's like, that sort of base level of like life on the land and stuff. And that sort of interconnectedness of different systems and how it connects. So that's kind of where it went through. I ended up working in media because as a kid, obviously being a childhood actor and voiceover artist, and then getting in obviously to Totally Wild, where I met you in Channel 10. You were on Toasted at the time when you first started at Channel 10. I'd already been there for a few years and working, and that's where I sort of, cut my teeth in that sort of science education space, translating scientific fact into informative, we wouldn't say educational, but informative content. Wasn't always the most entertaining, but we would try. So yeah, and then that sort of science communication stuff just sort of like went through. Obviously I did a massive stint just doing producing on a whole range of stuff, but I've always been interested in it. But then, and obviously, as you know, I spent a good couple of years in Indonesia with my own little conservation project there, and then, sort of come full circle and I'm sort of working in the science communication space now full time. But yeah, man. So like, as far as like my interest in climate change, I guess it was more like an interest in like science that then, because of like my base, like I'm no scientist, I didn't do very well. It's not my brain doesn't work like that. Hence why I work in media and communications now. But like, that's my interest, the way things work. And I like, knowing how different things work. And the climate is, it's I think some of the first jobs anyone had besides hunting and gathering, you'd have a medicine man, in like tribes, there was a medicine man for tens of thousands of years, or a witch doctor. And generally there was someone that was a rainmaker or someone that could read the weather. It was like, it's a tale as old as time. Like when's it going to rain? When's it going to be dry? How you read the seasons and how you read the climate. It's from indigenous cultures, the Polynesians that, discovered the whole Pacific Islands. It's part of human evolution's not the right word, but it's part of human society and how we relate to everything, whether they're reading the stars or reading the clouds. And all that sort of stuff. It's just that's it. I don't know. I feel like I've just like rambled, but it touches all things, was what I'm saying. But, as you alluded to when we first started here, I think it's become, there's boring science that no one cares about. And people go, well, that's science and that's a report. Like people talk about like erosion or geology, or like there's just stuff that's accepted, the science that makes our mobile phones work, or, satellite science or physics. But because climate science has come to a point where it's now been politicized. And so now that's where, and as again you said, conspiracy theories and all that sort of stuff, because it runs the findings and the stuff, and we're going on over like a century. The first people to report on emissions and, carbon, specifically carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and warming, goes back decades and decades. The first really thorough research into it was actually done by scientists that work for fossil fuel corporations, sort of saying, hey, our emissions are doing this. So we've known about it for well over half a century now in great detail. And
but hang on. I want to interject there. If we've known about it for 50 years, how long have we been damaging the Earth? And I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I kind of want to go and start from the beginning. But
okay, sorry, I rambled.
Noticed, no, that's okay. But if we've known about it for 50 years, then how long have we been impacting the climate negatively?
So generally most climate analysis, and that links to the changes in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And for all the people listening at home, greenhouse gases means gases in the atmosphere that help the atmosphere retain heat. So solar energy comes in, gets used by animals and plants and all the different things, and then some of it bounces out back into space. And so greenhouse gases, which is like a common term that's now been around for a while, are things in the atmosphere that hold some of that heat in. Mm-hmm. So you need some of them, otherwise we would turn into a snowball Earth. But then too much, you retain too much heat. So the question, how long have we been doing it? Generally, all this analysis, it goes to pre-industrialization. So it's before the Industrial Revolution. So when we started burning fossil fuels, essentially. So when we were to think of it like this, throughout human history, and we were boat building and we were chopping down trees and building fires and clearing forests, think of that as surface carbon. There's all this carbon on the face of the planet. It's already out there. It's animals and trees. And if you chop it and burn it and new forests grow, it's part of that surface carbon cycle. So the point where you go, when did we start damaging? It's when you start digging down and getting this stored carbon out of the ground and releasing that into the surface carbon cycle. That's the sort of human-induced warming. There's other ways those gases can come out, through volcanoes, tectonic activity. Gases can be released. There was when the Indian subcontinent was floating across the millions and millions of years ago, called the Deccan Traps. It was this massive volcanic thing that went for centuries, that released all these gases. So there's a whole bunch of ways it happens, but human-induced is essentially digging out all this stored carbon, and that happened in a really big way during the Industrial Revolution, when corporations realized they could power their operations by burning oil, coal, and gas to power their machinery. Obviously, our transport sector, and a whole bunch of other stuff that went along with that. So that was the sort of turning point where we really started to supercharge the sort of warming of the planet.
So let's just go back a little bit and try and explain to a layman like myself what climate change actually is. This is my understanding. We are heating up the atmosphere and destroying that little ozone layer, and as a result, the sun is making us hotter. Is that it?
Sure, to a degree. Yeah. To a degree. So so climate change is a massive umbrella, obviously. But if we're just talking about the sort of global warming component, the fact that global temperatures are rising on average, we're almost at that sort of 1.5 degree of increase since the pre-industrial
since we noticed
temperatures.
Yeah.
But so essentially, when these emissions, so let's say carbon dioxide, which is the main one, when it's in the atmosphere, so solar energy is like coming from the sun and it gets used by stuff, and then some of it gets released back out into space. There's a whole bunch of thermodynamics around that, but that's boring and I don't know enough about it to explain it in an engaging way. But I think you could picture that. Sunlight
That's how an
comes
eagle
in.
flies, right? That's
How an eagle flies?
Yeah, on the heat.
Oh, yeah. So part of that, so that's the upwell of hot air and how that goes. Sorry, I got lost with the eagle flies. So solar, let's just call it solar heat. Like, let's just really make it simple. Comes in, some of it bounces back out, and there's gases in the atmosphere which hold some of that in. And if there's too much of that, we hold too much heat in.
Right.
And
we
so
put
that's
ourselves in
what's
a heater.
happening. Yeah. So we are now trapping more heat. Our atmosphere is retaining and keeping more heat within itself because these gases aren't letting the heat go back out into space as much because of the increase in carbon emissions or carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
It's kind of like
Yes.
It's kind of like putting on a garbage bag underneath a jumper. You know how people want to make themselves sweat? They put a garbage bag on
it's
and then a
retaining
jumper
heat,
and
exactly.
run.
So at any one time, where we generate our own heat because that's like our homeostasis. That's like we're warm-blooded mammals or whatever, but endothermic and ectothermic. I can't remember which one's which, but reptiles and mammals. That's why I didn't do well at science. But so we are constantly emitting heat, and you want clothes that breathe. Otherwise, if you don't let it breathe, it gets hot in. That's essentially kind of like the greenhouse gases. You need some of it to go out and then retain some of it. Yeah.
So why do you think this is politicized? Like, if we have the science, it's now been 50 years, we've noticed it, we're going, oh my gosh, we're actually doing this. Why are there people who are saying it's not true? I don't understand how the science, if it's there and if there's literal evidence, how we're able to say that's a lie.
So the first part of that question is, why are people like against it? So like, why is it becoming politicized? So essentially, like, the fossil fuel industry is huge. Like, it's been a power of like part of industrialization. It's become ingrained. Like, the world oil trade, I think oil is one of the like most traded commodities on earth. You've got, everything, powered by whether it's gas in people's homes or gas used for industrial uses. Obviously, coal, is dug up out of the ground and then shipped around to be burnt in whether it's India or China. We've still got coal-fired power stations in Australia. They're getting pretty old and expensive and they break a lot, but we've still got them. And like a lot of countries still have them. I think England doesn't have them anymore. They're like, don't have any coal-fired power stations anymore. So it's this giant corporation that is worth, I don't know, trillions. Like, and so if you tried to like, it's like, essentially it's science is just reporting. This is the reality of the situation.
Yes.
And if people listen to science and you go, we need to do these things. And the reason it's become politicized is because if you do the things that need to be done, it's going to affect, corporate interests, and there'll be a shift. There has to be a major shift in how we generate electricity, and there has to be a major shift in our resource export markets. So especially we're in Australia, so we're in the top 3 exporters globally of coal and LNG. So we're a small country, but we're really important to the fossil fuel industry. So much more than other countries, we are there's a lot of like communications and efforts here to sort of like delegitimize the impacts of fossil fuel, because you need a captive local population to keep these industries going. Like, there's big money here. So there's that. There's also, there's politicians, and they might be running in seats that where there's a lot of comms. Like, so if you to go to some of these like resource heavy sectors, so say gas in WA, their newspapers are plastered with Woodside ads. The news coverage of them are really, really favorable to like gas industry and stuff like that. The government there is very supportive of that because in some of their seats, there's thousands of workers that rely on the fossil fuel industry. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why you wouldn't want a certain line of communication to resonate with the audience, with certain audiences, because you're trying to
Disrupt
ensure
everything. You're trying to disrupt the status quo.
there's an element of that. So it's essentially you're going up against a giant international, multinational, corporate infrastructure.
Yeah, and say you guys are doing the wrong thing.
Exactly.
And they're earning lots of money.
But they're also like, just so you know, that some of these things, like I think it's like I don't want to say like certain corporations and say the wrong thing, but some of them, I think, you know, like Glencore and BHP and stuff, like I don't know which ones, but they're definitely, I'm reading articles. I should have done a bit more research before I started this. They know they have to decarbonize their operations as well. So they're building wind farms with massive battery storage things. Like they know they have to decarbonize.
They're pivoting.
It's just, they're pivoting. They just want it to go slowly. And they also like, you know, at the moment, also like you'll see that like the politicization of it. So like America at the moment under the Trump presidency. And so they're trying to like hang on to the influence, any corporate influence they have globally. And because they're, again, a big gas exporter and they have massive control over the oil, like oil globally is traded in the US dollar, you know, not to get into too much history, but like anytime, you know, certain leaders have tried to trade, you can do your research about, which leaders try to not trade in the US dollar and make a new oil market. And you can see what happened to them. So there's like, they're trying to retain certain things. So that's another reason it can get politicized, because it's linked to that sort of stuff as well. So it's very multifaceted, man. It's like,
do you think there's an angle of when we hear global warming, oh my gosh, the earth is getting hotter, summer's going to get worse, all the ice is going to melt, we're all going to just evaporate from heat and drown, and oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. That people are like, woo man, chill out, it's not that bad. And then it creates like this, dude, that's really over the top extreme versus I've got to put another, you know, I just don't have to wear a jumper on winter or put the aircon on. Like, it seems like it's too catastrophized. Or is it accurate? Should it be that catastrophized?
So again, I feel like everything I'm saying is complicated and it has some really convoluted response. So essentially there's like tipping points in our climatic systems. So once we get to a certain level of warming, you can't stop it. So one of them is like the permafrost up in like Siberia and stuff. So as that ground, I'm just going to quickly shut my door.
Because of climate change? Because of global warming?
You're going to have to cut that? I don't know.
Not at all.
So as the ground thaws up in Siberia, the permafrost thaws and it releases like so much methane. And that warms the atmosphere, which thaws more of the permafrost, so more methane gets released. There's also the same effect in like the ice cap. So like ice that reflects like 90% more. I don't know, I'm going to stop saying percentages. Like way more sunlight back out into space than the ocean does. So as it melts, less is reflected out, so more of it melts. So there's like these like, and then there's also, you've got ocean currents as well. So they rely on different movements of, so there's a North Atlantic current. There's like a whole bunch of different currents around the world. They rely on the interaction of hot and cold water. So when certain things heat up, or when ice completely melts, you get ocean currents collapsing, which affects rainfall across the world. So there's all these tipping points. So yeah, there is. If you look at the climate models, you will get to a point, and like some areas will heat a lot more. So like when you talk about 3 degrees of warming, there's areas of Australia which will be 40% worse than that.
Whoa.
So you've got like literally, there'll be like places up in top of northern Australia where you go from like the peak of summer being 45 to being 50. So you literally have non-inhabitable zones and like sacrificial zones and stuff like that. So that's the sort of where we're at. And so currently the amount of carbon that is already in the atmosphere, what is already there, if we stop producing and burning fossil fuel tomorrow, we are like locked into a certain amount of warming.
Mm-hmm.
And
Forever?
so we're going to see sea level rise to a certain degree. We're going to see temperatures keep rising. But unfortunately, we are not stopping to dig out carbon out of the ground and keep burning it. So it's, yeah. But to go, so the question is it that big a deal? Eventually, yes. And that's the hard thing. It's like people can't save for a house. People will eat food and get overweight. They know something's bad for them next week and they'll still do it. And you're
Yeah.
trying to tell someone, your kid, by the time they're your age, like there'll be like food, like systems collapsing and da da da. They can't picture it. It's like, well, what do I do about it? I just want to
What do
sit
I
there
do
and watch
about it now?
Netflix.
Yeah, throw
I
away
just
my
want to
bloody
sit there and watch
aircon.
Netflix. So it becomes like people switch off. Like you can see it like multiple times in like Earth's history and like even in like modern history where humans have kind of gone like, oh, what do I do about it? And then suddenly you've got like some regime trying to wipe out a race or like some giant war because people go, eh. So you really need politicians to do something about it. So then the whole thing becomes focused on, that's how it gets politicized because the ones that will do more about it, the ones that'll do less about it, or they.
Not only that, though, here in Australia, you're only in power for 4 years. What are they going to do in that 4 years? And they're always looking to
You
get
can do a
re-elected
lot.
anyway.
True. And they can be in power, you could be in power again for like 2 or 3 terms, Some prime ministers have done that, or some, political parties have been in for a few terms. There's a lot you can achieve. You've got to pull the right industrial. I think that the really hard balance for obviously politicians, and not that I'm trying to give them a free pass, is like you've got to pull giant levers. Like,
Yeah.
make
You've got
sure
to have the balls to take down a giant company making billions of dollars, employing people, they're making the economy go around, and you've got to have the guts to go up to them and say, no, that's a big feat.
And it's also, but they can incentivize it. So as they decarbonize, they get incentives, or if they don't decarbonize, they get taxed. So there's this really fine balance of like levers you pull where you can make a transition happen. And it's hard. Like, like there's been times in human history, multiple times, like the whole of New York was filled with horses at the turn of the century. And then you look at photos and like Times Square is nothing but horses. And within 24 months, there's not a horse left and it's all motor cars. So we've had like giant stuff. The difference is now is globalization and world trade. So rather than like countries or cities, it's like there's global systems that have to shift. And it's linked to the, go.
One thing I remember learning when I was researching animals, ecosystems, and about the world in Totally Wild, I realized how resilient animals are and how resilient nature is.
Yeah.
And how well things can adapt, evolve, and it constantly seems to surprise us over and over and over how nature can adapt. Do you think the Earth is more resilient than we're giving it credit for? Do you think we are able, like the Earth is able to handle how much we turn up the heat, so to speak?
So the difference with that, when you look back through geological history, through millions of years at mass extinction events and stuff like that, generally for adaptation to take place, so when you talk about adaptation, you talk about shifts in species, changes in behavior, sometimes changes in the way they eat, changes in that sort of stuff. That takes like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of generations. You know what I mean? Like that takes a really long time, thousands of generations, depending on how much change needs to happen. So what the issue with what's happening now, when you talk, even if you talk about the world getting 3 degrees hotter in like a few hundred years, generally that stuff would happen over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So the adaptive ability of species, it will be greatly reduced because of the crunch, because of the short amount of time the change is happening in. And also like there's already signs of like a mass extinction to a degree, like the amount of species that are going extinct and stuff like that. Like we're at that stage where it could like snowball, because as species disappear from environments, again, it's like this feedback loop where you don't have the pollinator and then you don't have that plant anymore, which has a knock on to that insect. And because that insect doesn't have a host plant. So like ecosystems can quickly crumble depending on how they're affected. So I definitely think there's resilience, and part of like the climate change thing is, one, stop digging up all the stored carbon and burning it, because we're supercharging it at the stage we're at now. And because we've locked in a certain degree of warming, there's a lot of like adaptation and mitigation that's going to have to take place, and like a lot of work, and that's already like hugely expensive, like disaster bills and repair bills. Extreme weather's getting more severe, more frequent, and it's just going to like sort of have that sort of knock-on effect. But yeah, like there'll be a few species that will even like have benefits, but like when we're talking about the complexity of these ecosystems and the millions of types of species, unfortunately, no, a lot of them under a very like bad scenario where we keep burning it. I think one thing I will say, and I think it's just something to keep in mind, is the vast majority of coal, so what we burn, the vast majority, I can't remember, it's like 80%. Again, I shouldn't talk about percentages, but like way over half, like the vast majority of coal was all created like 300 million years ago. So all that carbon has been locked up in the Earth's crust or under the ground for 300 million years. So it's like we've had multiple ice ages and hot events and like times in Earth's history where there's been no ice, and times in Earth history where it's nearly been all ice. And all over 300 million years, it's all locked in there, because it's like you need a very specific types of conditions for coal to form. And now we're digging it all up and releasing it into the atmosphere. Like the amount of like carbon that's in the atmosphere now, the last time we had that, like currently, like we're over 400 parts per million. There were like horses in the high Arctic and stuff. Like it was like a completely different atmosphere. You're like, well, why aren't we seeing that now? It's like, it takes a long time for ice to melt. Like it could be a 40-degree day and you could put ice into a cup and like put it on your table. It's going to take a couple of hours to melt. So when you're talking about the whole of Antarctica and the whole of the Arctic, it takes a long time for all that ice to melt, no matter how hot the Earth might get. And it is ramping up. But so those sorts of just something to keep in mind, what's actually being like released into the atmosphere. That's why when you hear people say like, oh, we can plant trees and stuff. Yeah, you can like help with like carbon sequestration.
Thanks for the tree, mate. Yeah, cheers.
No, but like I don't want to like dismiss, like all, it has to be one of those things. All options have to be on the table. You need adaptation, you need mitigation, you need to be improving carbon sequestration, you need cattle farmers to be changing the way they use their soils to capture more carbon, you need to be planting new forests, you need to be rewild, you need to do it all, as well as stop burning all the carbon.
Yeah. So,
stop releasing all the emissions, stop polluting. So that's the key, is stop digging up all the freaking stored carbon and burning it as pollution into the atmosphere. That's number one. Yeah. But there's a whole bunch of other things. Planting trees still gonna help.
One of the things I've noticed walking around, you'll see on houses on their veranda, on their gate or what, it says climate action now, and it's yelling at me. I'm like, what do you want me to do, man? Throw my phone away? Oh, what? Like, as an individual, other than planting a tree. Away. Yeah, like, hang on. I remember once I was talking about it on radio, and my co-host kept going on about it, and I said, listen, you are a hypocrite. You have to start living like you're in a stone age if you really want to make a difference. And I don't just mean you, I mean everyone. The hairdresser, the hairdryer, the aircon, the fuel, the phone, everything. Just like you're not cutting the mustard. Like, shut up. And I feel like a lot of people fall into this category where they're so loud about it, yet when it comes to the things that they actually need to do, they need to go Amish. Is that the case?
Not really. So all the examples you use there were all talking about how we generate electricity. So no air conditioning, no refrigeration, no this, no that. So that's all how we generate the electricity. So you can generate electricity without burning fossil fuels. You can have like solar and wind and pumped hydro for backup power. You can have battery systems for backup power. There's gravity backup power. There's a whole way to store the power from that. There's even like, niche applications like tidal energy and stuff, which again, all needs to be on the table. So when we're talking about energy generation, there are ways to generate energy where you don't have the same level of pollution. So it's not so much like you need to stop everything. It's no, we need to change the way we generate this electricity. So that, no, you don't have to go Amish, but you do need to change the way these energy systems work. Because at the end of the day, it's a flow of ions. So however, just like when you look at it, think of it this way. No matter what's spinning or charging or burning at the end of that, it all ends up as, look at the telegraph wire, it's a flow of ions. So that's all it is. It's a flow of ions. It's just electricity. So that's what you got to picture in your head. So at that end, if you can make that flow of ions happen without having to dig up all the carbon and burn it and supercharge global warming, great. Then you don't have to go back to the Ice Age. You don't have to go back to the Stone Age.
Yeah.
You can, yeah. But look, I think one thing I did want to say about that though. So I don't want to get into like economic systems, but like you can't have perpetual growth. So our current economic system needs like constant population growth. You know what I mean? So you might have, if you can read news articles about Japan and Korea's dwindling populations and once populations go down, it like affects their economy because the way our like economic systems work, you need ever more workers, ever more consumption, ever more production, like GDP, gross domestic product.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, we want more GDP, because it's all about more growth. But if the growth relies on like natural resources, we're on a finite planet. So there's definitely like a flaw in a lot of our economic systems. So like there definitely has to be a shift in our means of production and a shifts in the way we consume, the way we consume stuff as well. Like that definitely, yeah.
If there are roughly around, 14 billion people on Earth, right? Just say that's...
I think it's about 8 billion.
Okay, 8 billion.
Yeah,
8 billion.
Global population, because I've done too many butchered percentages. Let's just get that right.
Let's get the people.
I just want to get this right because I keep saying bad stuff. I'm going to watch this back and go, why? Anyway, the current global population is approximately 8.2 billion people. And that figure was reached in 2022. So let's go around 8 billion.
8 billion people. If every single person, 8 billion, in fact, let's take out kids. So let's go 7 billion, right? Ooh. If 7 billion people planted a tree...
I would say there'd be more than...
There'd be more kids. Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, whatever. 5 billion.
5 billion. Just go 5 billion.
Let's just pick the number.
Go, bro.
5 billion people planted a tree today. In 2 years' time when that tree is grown, would that help? 5 billion trees extra on planet Earth.
It would help a wee bit. So I just got to...
So essentially we're screwed.
Well, the thing you've got to remember, and that was I started off the conversation here, everything that happens on the surface, like surface carbon, like planting trees and fires. So if you burnt all the forests in North and South America, that'd release a whole lot of carbon. But then if they all grew back, it would draw it back down again. But because we're releasing stored carbon, that's the difference. So yes, it would help, but a little bit. Because it would draw some carbon down from the atmosphere. One interesting thing is here, some ecosystems are much better. So mangrove forests are like amazing carbon sinks. I think there's like certain swamp, like forest and bog forest, they like draw carbon down and lock it in. So there's certain ecosystems that lock it in.
Actually drink the carbon.
Yeah, and lock it up.
So
and
what
also
if... There's
ocean ecosystems as well that do it? Yeah. Sorry.
What if we took a large part of Australia, right? There's a lot of Australia that isn't being used and you can't use it. It's just desert, flat, hot, can't do anything with it, right? Imagine if we took a giant piece of Australian's desert in the middle and turned it into some sort of carbon sink. Would that work?
You'd need a lot. So I got a question for you. What percentage, and this is including all the deserts, all the land, so the whole of Australia's land mass, right? What percentage do you think of Australia is used for grazing? So that we're talking like sheep and
That would be most of it.
cows. So so you would say, and that's including the Simpson Desert, the Great Desert, the Sandy Desert,
No, the
the
deserts.
whole of Australia, and then you've got the East Coast where all the people live, and you don't see cows or sheep. But what percentage of Australia's land mass is used for grazing, for pastures, for grazing? What do you reckon?
Grazing?
Grazing, yeah.
I'd say a lot less than we think. I'm going to say around 10%.
So
Wow.
over and that includes everything. So the house where you're in now,
Yeah.
the cities, the deserts, all that is included. Over 50% of the land mass of Australia is devoted to that, because sometimes you have grass, sometimes it's dry, sometimes it's all that. You've got to like move the problem. Like these cattle properties are like astronomical. Like when you look at what some of these private landholders, like the top landholders in Australia, they own small countries.
I know. Yeah.
Where are we talking? So the
lot.
question you asked me was,
can we get the middle of Australia?
Carbon sink. See, the thing is, the middle of Australia's desert. So what are you going to do? Pump, so you're going to like spend like trillions of dollars pumping all this water into the middle of Australia, completely change all the ecosystems, devote our entire...
what much ecosystems there anyway?
Well, yeah, but devote our entire like economic output to building these giant pipelines that'll have to be kept up to scrap to dump all this water in the middle. And it'll take 100 years. And then by the time you've done it, some of the pipes are breaking, and then you've got to have... And the amount of energy you would need to use to create this system.
And then you would coal energy to create the sink.
And flood this whole like desert area. And then what happens when you put water in these desert areas, there's aquifers and stuff. So they all like connect, and then some of it's salty. Look, when you're talking about there are like way out there research projects about ecosystem engineering. They're interesting, but all the solutions that are on the table, they are the most wild and the most out there. And they're the ones that have the most amount of economic energy and like manpower input for potentially a massive experiment that doesn't work. So when you have proven solutions on the table, you focus on them. But it's an interesting, like I like them. Like there's people in there like blowing like steam over the Great Barrier Reef, and there's people up in the Arctic like pumping water up in the air to try and make ice grow, and there's even like this theory where they're going to create this like giant blanket in Antarctica that stops the warm water hitting the ice and stuff. Like there's these wild things around on the table that have funding. Because the thing is, and the reason they have funding is because there's rich people that go, you know what, we're going to need it eventually, and if I have the IP, my company in 20 or 40 years, when they realize we need to do something like this.
Anyway. Why don't the smartest people in the world, i.e. your rich, like your Elon Musks, these people, why aren't they trying to solve it?
Yeah, but look what he did to the transportation sector, man.
I don't know what he did to the transportation sector.
EVs, bro.
So he's doing something.
He made them cool.
Yeah, that's true. He's doing something.
He made, there's a lot of things I disagree with about Elon Musk. But Tesla, as a company, he made EVs extremely popular, and he built the infrastructure. Like when he came to Australia with Tesla, he had to build the charging stations up and down the Pacific Highway. He's like, all right, they're not there, I'll build them. We're not doing this, I'll do them. You haven't got a permit, I'll get the permit. So to a certain degree, not he, but Tesla, he's the CEO, so I'm going to use the term Tesla because there's a lot of people that are very smart that are doing a lot of work and a lot of amazing engineers that, you know. So to a degree, he did help in that transportation sector by popularizing EVs and helping that transportation sector decarbonize. So that to a degree is how he helped. You know, Bill Gates is also, he's a bit obsessed with nuclear energy, and let's not get into that. Because in countries that already have nuclear energy and already have the infrastructure and the trade and all the permits and stuff like that, you know, the thing is, Bill Gates is way more obsessed with like health. So he's much more obsessed with like children's and health and global populations. But yeah, like there are a lot of, and like there's a guy, Cannon Brooks in Australia, extremely wealthy guy. Twiggy Forrest, the guy from Fortescue Metals, he's an Australian guy, massively investing in renewables here. And yeah, Cannon Brooks, he's bankrolling this enormous solar farm up in the NT that's going to connect to this giant cable to power Singapore. There's these guys in Queensland called Energy Estate that want renewable energy data centers linked with undersea cables to America. So there are massive things happening. There's big shifts. And as I said, there's these mining companies that are building their own wind farms and energy storage things. So the solutions are happening. It's just that it's any change, Have you ever asked your wife to change a small thing, Seamus? And how much that might cause tension and a grating, or she might ask you to change in a certain way, and the resistance you feel because that's you and that allows you, So you're asking a global, because everything is opinion, everything is just people. A corporation is just people. The judicial people is just people. When you deal with a police officer, it's just people. The politician is just people. They all have egos and trauma and emotions and stuff. But when you're talking about this global corporation, you're going, hey, everybody, worth $1 trillion, the whole of the oil trade in the world is backed in the US dollar. Don't do it anymore. It's have tension. You can't make change. It's what's the old saying, Shamo? You can't make an omelette without breaking some eggs.
Or teach an old dog new tricks. Now, it seems like there's a gap in the market for businesses to take on the BHPs by buying up large plots of land and doing wind farms or solar farms or creating some sort of... I remember in primary school, we were tasked with finding ways to get energy. And one of the ideas was putting a fan down in the ocean, so when the water goes past, the current collects, and it's like a little turny thing, you get
like a
energy
turbine.
from turning. Yeah. Oh, is that what they're called? That's a thing, right?
Turbines. That's essentially how most things work. A wind, so solar energy, that's a photovoltaic cell. Sorry, you finish your thing first, go. Or will I talk? I don't know. Sorry.
No, why the hell aren't more companies wanting to do that? Because it seems like there's what I've noticed in the business world, in my limited experience in business, but my obsession with it has led me to ask questions and investigate. And what I'm seeing is, if you're ethical and if you're seen to be making these ethical decisions in business, you get patted on the back, and it's a great marketing tactic to actually boost your income because you're seen to be doing something positive for the world. So it's a wonder why these entrepreneurs or businesses aren't going, hey, let's make energy without digging into the ground and using coal.
Yeah.
And actually taking on the competition like BHP, which I believe is either the first or second largest mining company in the world.
Yeah, no, but yeah, there are those examples, especially if you look at the energy systems. You might feel, especially because we live in Queensland, you've got a membership to the Courier Mail, don't you? To a News Corp publication?
Not anymore. It got taken off me.
There you go. We're in the top 3 coal producers in the world.
That's mental.
Queensland, over half of coal produced exported. We're in the top 3 coal exporters in the world. Queensland is the majority of that. And you live in the capital city. So you would see, when I have European friends come here and they see mining and resource sector ads on billboards and TV ads, they're like, what the hell? Why are coal miners advertising? It makes no sense to them. And if they looked at a newspaper here and they see these pro coal pieces, it's what propaganda are you guys eating up? This is so weird. We don't have any of that. And then they hear they'll see all this stuff against offshore wind farms. They're like, oh, your offshore wind farms must be really bad in Australia. I'm like, we don't even have one. We literally don't have an offshore wind farm. It's just this hype. So when you kind of are saying why don't these rich guys, or why isn't there this energy shift happening? It's happening. Over 40% of our energy in Australia is now generated by renewables. There's countries where the vast majority is already happening. There's rich guys making lots of money, paying lots of people. There's companies in Europe building different types of turbines. China is just absolutely charging their economy by pumping out solar panels. Biden, obviously, he's no longer in power, but that's what he did. He had this Inflation Reduction Act where he spent like billions and billions of dollars. He built all these renewable energy factories in America because they're trying to like shift the economy, create new, they call renewable energy exports, to create new trade systems, create new economies. So it's not all based around fossil fuel. It is happening. It just doesn't feel like it because, when you said that, did you know that 40% of the electricity in our grid was, exactly.
No idea about that.
Yeah. And
no idea that Australia was the third largest and also
of coal producer.
It's also coming from Queensland. No idea about that.
Yeah. So it's like, you don't necessarily like, and there's no reason that you should know that. It's just one part of your life. Like people love cars, people love music, people love food. You when you chat to your wife, you're trying to sort out something about a bill, you play with your child, you've got your work to do, which isn't related to it. I work in science communication, so therefore I would have a bit more nous on it. But it's like one of those things where like you kind of go, oh, why aren't people doing it? It's like, well, they are. It just doesn't feel like it because we don't physically see it. It's like if people plant a tree, you can see a tree grow. Someone paints their house, you drive by, the house is painted, but you don't see the end of those telegraph poles. Whereas people in the country and regional Australia, they're living it a bit more. They see the turbines and solar farms go up, and some of them aren't too happy about it.
We're seeing the noise people are making for climate change, but we're not necessarily seeing people applaud people doing the work and making the change.
Yeah, so that's the media market as well. No one's going to go, the weather was fine today and this good thing happened. You're not going to buy that newspaper. You're going to go, those types of people are bad and we need to stop that from happening, and conflict and drama. People love it. That's why people watch Maths. What is it? Married at First Sight. Yeah, that's what it's called, Maths. And like that stuff, they just want the drama and the thing, it's like, it's media. So one of the, I can't remember where the quote comes from, but the whole thing with media is they will put forward what the public are interested in, not what is in the public interest.
Yes, that is true.
They need clicks. They need to sell stuff. They need to before it was selling papers, now it's getting online subscriptions. They need click-through rates. Like in these journos that are writing for like in certain offices, because they're constantly upgrading the homepage and click-through rates, it's like a tally board. They know that their story's got more clicks than the other ones and it's been shifted to the homepage and all that. And a lot of the stuff is like these editors, they just need to make sure they're getting the clicks and the sales. And unfortunately, humans, when they're distracted and stuff, you need something dramatic and conflicty. And
I guess there would be a sense of the work that you do that would be really rewarding because you're outside of that hustle that doesn't actually exist or matter, the chasing the clicks. But at the same time, because you're in the media side of things, you're still kind of in it. Like you're fighting the good fight, but you're still dragged into the annoying frustrations of media.
Totally. It's an interesting one. Like there's sort of like, if you start to get into like, the principles of communication and media and stuff like that, there's a few things that make like a good news story. Like there's, timeliness, and so it links to something that's happening right now. There's currency, like trending topics, impact. Is there someone famous in it? Is there conflict in it? Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that will make something interesting. But yeah, man, like science communication is an interesting thing because it's like you speak to these scientists and it's like, we just have to say this. But then you kind of go, well, one, if you're saying something that's too like the world is screwed, people are switching off. If you do anything that's got way too much jargon, like I can talk sometimes to someone. Yeah, I see it in people's eyes. Like you talk to someone in facts and figures and their eyes glaze over. Like, I said earlier on in the conversation, I said, and you can go back and listen, I said that we are in the top 3 exporters of coal and gas in the world, but you didn't actually trigger to that statement until I said it the second time, like 20 minutes later. You went, are we the top 3 coal exporters in the world?
Yeah. I've glazed over many times in this conversation, don't you?
Exactly. I can see it. And see, that's the tricky thing. When you want to go, what's going on with climate science? Unfortunately, it's grade 8 science. That's like kids are learning it. So If you spoke to a 12-year-old right now that's just going to average Australian school and does okay in science, he'd be able to tell you what I told you. Like, it's
Yeah.
grade 8 science. It's like, this makes things hotter and we're doing this. We're taking it out of the ground and burning it. But we just didn't get taught that in school. We got science education, but now they actually learn about this stuff because we need to train engineers and scientists and people to work in this field because...
But do you think, going back to scientists saying we just need to say this, but I remember like doctors, they'll never say definitively one way or another because nothing is actually always guaranteed, especially in the health sector. So,
Yeah.
if you ask them a question, does that mean this? And they're like, well, it doesn't necessarily, but there's a chance. If there's 0.000.1 chance, they'll still say there's a chance of cancer. And it's like, they'll never say, no, you're safe, because they need to protect themselves. So is that the same with science? Because I guess science can change.
Yeah, there's like a certain level of like vigorous, like scientific debate. Like the science is settled on climate change. Like we know the mechanisms and how it works and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not debating that. But I think what you're saying is like sometimes scientists, they won't speak. Like a politician will get up and say, it's a hoax, it's a con job, it's all wrong. Whereas a scientist who's actually, and that's a complete lie, and then the scientist that is standing there with all the knowledge and the truth will go, well, actually, what research shows is... Where what they need to do is come up and go, you're a goddamn lie. It's all, like, what you're saying is complete lies, you're feeding lies. But then all it does is negate. So one of the things is if you argue, if you fight fire with fire, eye for an eye makes the world blind or whatever. It is a very tricky thing. But if you don't listen to science, you end up in the dark ages. End of story. That's it. If you don't listen to scientific truth, you end up in the dark ages. That's what happened in Europe. And you had the Islamic Gilded Age, essentially, the Ottoman Empire, where all the science, like, over half the stars in the night sky have Arabic names. Algebra is an Arabic word. So while Europe was disemboweling heretics and like doubting science and saying you're wrong and going against science, on the other side in the Islamic world, they were embracing science and maths and the Library of Baghdad and this massive bloom of knowledge, and they even expanded their empire, and the whole global knowledge relied on that. So it's like when these politicized things happen and people are going against scientists and, this massive body, like half a century of scientific work, it's actually as scary as the threat of climate change, because what you're seeing is a cultural shift. People are actually going, I don't trust any of that. I don't trust mainstream media. I'm going to watch something on YouTube and I trust that politician. And so it's called like, it's kind of like this post-truth era that we're in, where if you stop, there's so much seeds of doubt and this power of repetition to go, is it true? And climate change is a hoax. And if you say it enough and enough and enough, and you say, don't trust that media, watch this media. And on that media, they keep saying climate change is a hoax, is a hoax, is a hoax. Suddenly you go, why do I trust a scientist? Who's this guy in a white coat? But the essence of that is you have someone that has studied it their entire life and 50 years of research and the whole thing, and you are not listening to them, and you're listening to someone who was profiteering off an old way of doing things, which is destroying the planet. So it's a very icky, strange era that we're in, and we're seeing more division, whether it be socioeconomic and like the different types of like narratives we're seeing in the news against certain ethnic groups. And we're seeing this very divisive thing happening, and it's a weird way to do it, but you know what I mean by the post-truth era, like,
yes,
that's the scary
absolutely.
thing. And I've been saying it for years. If you don't listen to science, you will end up in the dark ages. And it's just, it never gets repeated, never gets used in my communications. No one that I use it ever says it. But it's actually, the end of the day, it's the truth, man. Because anytime that happens in human history, and the thing is, we're going to end up in the dark ages with climate change anyway. Because so much of our food systems and our fresh water, and there'll be so many systems that will collapse. All great. If you look at like the downfall of like the Aztecs and the Mayans, obviously the Spanish invaded certain ones, and that was, an invasory force, but the collapse of, Egypt and Rome and all that, there's always a point where civilization expands to a point and we get so advanced and then it collapses. And unfortunately, we're now in a global civilization with globalized systems, and unless we can actually like listen to science and heed the warnings and know and follow the actual steps we have to do to make sure that we have economic systems that are equitable and fair, have energy systems that are not polluting, and do the things that we know has to be done, we're going to end up, unfortunately, globally in this very similar place to all of those previous empires. But it'll just be the worldwide.
Wow. As you were saying that, I just thought of that. Like, I was like, if all of these civilizations got really big, really successful, really, great, and then they crumble, and now we're one giant civilization, that means it all comes to an end instead of,
there'll always
you know what
be
I mean?
pockets. Yeah, there'll always be pockets.
Yeah,
It's
pockets
interesting.
survive,
but what will happen is not what will happen. See, that's bad language. Don't say what will happen. I don't know what will happen. Don't say what will happen. But in say in a downfall of like global civilization and global economic collapse and all that sort of stuff, there'll be pockets and there'll be, anyway, blah, blah, blah. Otherwise we're going to start getting into bloody Joe Rogan territory if we start hypothesizing about stuff we know nothing about.
Yeah. And this is where conspiracy theories are born. Well, honestly, it's been like a lecture listening to you, and there's been
I'm
a few
not even
things.
a scientist.
One, I feel like it's not as bad as a lot of people perceive it to be. Yes, it's bad, but after hearing what you're saying, that we're actually doing things, people are actually making a difference. That's good. And that's good. So I'm feeling a little bit better about that. And also, I have a much better understanding of what the hell it is. And I feel like what you mentioned before, so many people, their eyes glaze over and they tune out because you start hearing these words that no one really knows. And you're like, what the hell do you mean, dude? Like, stop telling me how to live, okay? And there's also a lot of individuals can't do anything about the giant coal mines. So, been an interesting understanding.
Yeah. And one thing about the coal thing as well is it's a dwindling resource. It's dropping in value, drastically because there's less demand because people are now using renewable energies. We're now, just like there's tipping points in the ocean currents, there's also tipping points in the economy where when enough people shift away from a resource, it becomes uneconomical. So there'll be a point in the next 10, 15 years where it's too expensive to dig the coal out of the ground and ship it overseas. You won't be able to finance that actual trade structure because it's too expensive. Do you want me to, I know we're wrapping up, but do you want me to tell my pea analogy? The pea in the pool?
Yes, I do.
Because I think it's a really good visualization that never gets used. So we had a big conversation and we talked about carbon being released from under and putting in it. So before the Industrial Revolution, so pre-industrial levels, we were at under 300 parts per million of carbon emissions in the atmosphere. What does that mean? And now we're over 400 parts per million in the atmosphere. What does that mean? So to put it in pea in a pool terminology, so we have in an Olympic-sized swimming pool in summer, there's a background amount of pee. We're calling it, 280 parts per million pee or 300 parts per million pee.
6 kids, we in the pool. Get over it, right? It's chlorine, fine.
And then suddenly it's school holiday, it's a public holiday, everyone floods in there, everyone's peeing. So that per parts per million. So the pee per parts per million to get from pre-public holiday pee in the pool parts per million to post-public holiday pee per million, you need 1,500 adults to do a full pee in that pool. So when you go, it's parts per million, and it means 500 adults.
That's a school. I've spoken at schools that big.
Yeah, so you go people, because you'll hear people that are debating emissions. These carbon emissions have only gone up by 0.1%. Because you're talking about parts per million in the entire atmosphere.
Yeah.
But when you talk parts per million in a pool, to get from pre-industrial pollution to post, it's 1,500 P. So that's how much carbon emissions have gone into the atmosphere. When you think about it in that level, it's a lot.
Yeah, if you see 1,500 fully grown adults horse pissing into an Olympic pool and then saying, go for a dive, mate, there's no way I'm jumping in that pool, right?
Yeah.
You would come out smelling like horse piss.
Yeah, we are currently running first of its kind global chemistry experiment with the global atmosphere. Mental. And we're still doing it. People are still fighting it. But there you go.
I guess there's an element of that frog in the frog in the pot theory where we don't really know what it felt like 50 years ago. So we don't know the difference. It's like it's like staying in the pool not knowing that people are urinating in it. And you've been in there for 2 hours going, this water tastes amazing.
I tell you who is living it. The Pacific nations, man. Pacific Island nations. Their islands are going under. The storms, the winds, the flooding. Right? There are people around climate, mate, we've got our government signing deals for climate refugees because there's islands going under the water. There's people on the front line of fire, like communities in regional Australia that have seen drought that no one's ever seen floods that no one has ever seen. So there's people that are in that pot, man. There's people that are boiling.
They're in that drowning pool.
And they're in that swimming pool.
Fully grown adults are weeing straight on the head as they're coming from the freestyle.
The end.
Hey, listen, Sean, mate, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And if you've been watching this, listening to this, and you want to have your say on climate change, global warming, if you think what Sean is saying is absolute BS and you're falling into that category, write in the comments. I want to hear your opinion. Or if you are actually doing something, you're planting those trees, you've got that climate action now sign, you've got an EV, whatever it is, I want to hear what you're doing to help global warming and reduce that emission and getting the earth hotter. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you next time.